People who take walks at night, what's the scariest thing you've seen? I once saw tiny hands reaching out of a sewer grate. Took me a minute before I realized it was a raccoon. I saw a tarantula use a crosswalk as if it was a law-abiding pedestrian. The dude was just trying to be a good example for the other spiders. A 7 feet tall male brown kangaroo in the middle of the footpath. Buff as duck just staring me down. You bet your ass I turned and went the other way, he just went about his business. There was news report a while ago about a super large and buff kangaroo that would beat up dog walkers, safe to say that I'm not going to Australia anytime soon. If you think kangaroos are intimidating, wait till you see our large birds. I have seen a cassowary in the wild. These things are killing machines, they can take a man's throat out with one kick. I've also had a mob of approximately 70 emu running towards me on my grandfather's farming property. They turned away when they realized I was there, but 70 of these animals coming your direction is pretty ducking incredible. I'm so lucky to have seen that. Dude, I got close to an emu on a farm and that dinosaur low clicking noise they make freaks me out so badly. I had no idea they could do that. I remember camping once and was heading back to the site alone when I could hear a noise like someone bearing a plastic drum. I was curious, so I went towards the noise into a bit of scrub, and suddenly there was the emu, looking at me, making the noise. I just backed away while it stared me down. I always think horror movies are far-fetched with the people alone going to check a noise in a dark forest, yet here you are. That sounds like someone slowly dragging a machete along concrete. Let's go see if it is. Was up on a hill in the countryside at midnight when a man with a rifle came out of nowhere, ran right past me, and wasn't seen again. I went home shortly after that. Damn, these Civil War ghosts always running around. Iguana fell out of a tree on an unseasonably cool night. I have never before seen this sentence. Edit, till this is not uncommon in South Florida. Crazy. And entertaining. While I'm here, I'd like to highlight that I have been alerted to the existence of a sub devoted to the phenomenon of brand new sentences. Well alerted, thanks. Yeah, in the winter months when we get cold fronts, the damn things go into a low power mode kind of stasis and fall out of the trees. They're usually fine unless a car runs them over. Once it warms up, they go back to normal. Another person walking at night. Especially if it's on an uncommon pathway. A guy got onto an empty walking trail a couple hundred feet ahead of me last night and kept looking back and stopping so that I'd eventually catch up and he could get behind me. That's a great way to ruin someone's night walk. Well, now they were probably just as terrified. Two deer fighting, then yelling at each other, then having sex. Well, that was an adventure in a few words. Living in a rural village, I was taking a late night walk with my GF, when suddenly we hear aloud what we thought was a human scream. Turned out it was a sheep. Jump scared us hard though. Oh man, when my wife and I were stoners, we took our bong out back and we turned the lights off, and when I was mid-hit I hear a god-awful scream followed by the ground pounding of something large running to use from the woods. My wife ran in and slammed the door behind her and I almost couldn't get in. Found out a few months later it was a deer screaming and it jumped over the broken fence. I was super stoned and that was the most awful experience I've ever had because I couldn't move fast enough. Edit, this is the closest video I could find that's short, most ungodly scream. U2.b. One time I turned around to see what was behind me just out of intuition, and I saw someone step behind a tree rather quickly and try to hide from me. I stood there for a second to confirm this, then I speed walked home. Duckin' creepy. Speed walked, I would have Usain bolted out of there. Found a guy who hung himself in a park. Called 911 and answered some questions. Was a long night. I found an odd guy and the damn police questioned me for 6 hours until the medical people said he odd. Seeing is scary, but hearing and not seeing is ducking terrifying. You bet it is. A good example I can bring to the table is the sound of a rabbit screaming while you hear the low growling of either a raccoon or a cougar trying to silence it. I hope it wasn't the latter, because this happened right near my backyard. I heard the same, but it was an owl shredding the rabbit. I did not expect it to be such a big bird. It was like a fire hydrant covered with feathers sitting there munching on Thumper. Dead body on the side of the street with a sign around its neck saying I'm a cell phone thief, don't be like me. This was maybe 20 years ago in Manila, Philippines. Happened to my grandfather too. He was walking our dog at 5 a.m., dog went to do his business near a dark, grassy empty lot and they found a dead body bound up with a sign on him saying he was a thief. This practice is called salvage in the Philippines. Basically an extrajudicial killing done by policemen or vigilantes on criminals and drug addicts, or suspected criminals. It's basically been going on way before Duterte took office, but it's only with him it was somewhat institutionalized and blatant. Before that, the police didn't brandish it with so much impunity, and didn't dare target teens or grandmothers. Nowadays most of the poor are fair game. If you have money and connections you can still buy your way out of things. A man on a bike passed me and he wore a jacket, shoes, and a hat, but no pants or underwear. At first I couldn't believe that I just saw his bare ass. Edit, typo. They saw two moons that night. A gigantic mother moose and her baby about 30 yards away. Glad you made it out of that situation alive. What I thought was a body in the woods, and after a bit of back and forth on the phone with the police I returned with a few helpful coppers to find a slightly miffed drunk person who'd had an argument with his missus. What was there to go back and forth about? Body in the woods isn't emergency enough? I once had a back and forth with a dispatcher when I called about a guy jumping in front of cars, mostly mine, in the middle of a highway at 4 a.m. I had to swerve into the oncoming lane, and still nearly clipped him. The dispatcher started grilling me for his name and where he lived, and I'm like, look, I'm just trying to drive to work. He's over at this intersection. The dispatcher started grilling me for his name and where he lived. This made me laugh. Lady, I'm a mile past him. Send some cops and have them collect his id. Almost 100% sure I witnessed a kidnapping. I was going to get my mail late at night while living in an apartment complex, and on the way back I noticed a woman in her pajamas surrounded by a few men right by a car. There was an argument and looked like they forced her in the car and drove off. I found her slipper nearby on the grass. I of course called the police and they came and I let them know what I saw, but I never found out what actually happened. Similar experience here. In high school, late at night walking home from a friend's house maybe a mile away. Halfway car comes cruising super slowly down the street. I hear someone screaming in the car. I was sure they were calling for help. I start following the car, and as I get on the phone with the cops the car starts pumping the gas, so I just run after them and try to follow them, but I lost them pretty quickly. Never learned what really happened. I hate the lack of resolution, like I want to know if this person ended up okay or not. I still think about it and worry about what happened. I just always remember finding that slipper and chills going down my spine. This sort of reminds me of the time my family and I went on a 3-day road trip in the summer. When we got back to our house, we noticed that there was a woman's small purse and other belongings, like makeup and some other things, strewn about our backyard. There was also a wallet with an id. We called the cops and they came and gathered everything up, then left. Never found out who it was or what happened, but it was kind of scary to know that while we were gone, a woman could have been assaulted in our backyard. She looked quite young, too. I live out in the country, more woods and fields around me than houses. There are several dirt paths through the woods that farmers use for their tractors and all during the day. I like to run on these paths because it's usually quiet and no traffic, unlike the road. During the hottest part of the summer I run at night because it's cooler outside. So one night, it had rained during the day, so all the tracks on the path were gone. I was out running around midnight. I had an uneasy feeling but didn't see anything. But then I circled around and on my second pass down a particular way, I saw my footprints, but then I saw another set of prints, bigger than mine, that hadn't been there before. Then I saw they made the turn the same way I had earlier. I cut it short that night, never saw anyone, but still. Wow, I did not expect all this. Lol, thanks for the awards. The parts of the path where you only saw one pair of footprints? That's when Bigfoot was carrying you.